I built a lamp using antique oak while overcoming challenges with an axe. Plus, I tackled my procrastination as my shop lease ended, leaving me without a workspace for months. A couple years ago, I acquired a substantial amount of old barnwood beams. More on them later. I've been using these beams to create rustic furniture and interior decor. Recently, a client requested me to build him a floor lamp. Excited about a popular design I've wanted to build for a long time, I proposed it to the client, who enthusiastically accepted. Now, my task is to figure out how to bring this lamp to life. I started out by removing all of the visible nails that I could remove. Some were very tough, just like this one. So while denailing the beam, I will tell you more about the origin of this wood. A young couple I know was renovating an 18th century farmhouse, of which the roof was constructed using wooden beams. Luckily, most of the construction was made using oak, which easily lasts hundreds of years. When they replaced the roof with a modern structure, they needed to get rid of it. I had a couple days worth of work sawing it into manageable lengths, as well as cleaning hundreds of years worth of dirt and rotten sapwood off the beams. But in the end, I was left with a big stock of unique, characterful oak beams to give a new life. I needed to cut my beam to length, and the cut needed to be perpendicular. I don't have a good tool for this. I also don't have a miter saw, so I thought using my track saw, I should be able to do it. It was sketchy, but in the end, with a little bit of hand sawing and cleaning up, it worked out. In the intro, I mentioned there is a clear deadline. I had bought a new shop, which I should be able to move into by the end of January. This clip was recorded on the 26th of November, so far before my deadline, so I wasn't too concerned at this point. But since the construction of my new shop was advancing and I already terminated my lease, I started to realize that there will be a deadline. Back to the build. I used a chisel to clean up where I used my handsaw to finish the cut. Since my Festool track saw doesn't cut deep enough to go through the whole beam, and I don't have a miter saw, so I solved it like this. Since this lamp is going to be in someone's home and not be the roof of someone's home, I took care to really clean it up very nicely. Using my wire wheel, I was able to get into all of the cracks, and of course I was wearing a respirator for this. In the end, I think this beam lost about half a kilo worth of dust, which I then cleaned up using my vacuum cleaner. I was pretty excited about this part. This is where we turn a beam into a segmented lamp. Starting with the first segment. Again, my track saw doesn't cut deep enough, so I'll spare you the footage of me sawing it by hand. But once I got my top piece, I started out by drilling the holes where the dowels would keep the segments in place. I have a very long drill bit and I'm quite handy with it, so I was able to drill it by hand. This way, the holes were already in place before the segments were cut, and everything would line up perfectly afterwards. I work in a shop where I don't have a lot of specialized equipment, so sometimes I need to be creative, just like here where I drill these deep holes by hand. But for once, I had the perfect tool for the job, my bandsaw. Using it, I was able to cut all of the segments for this lamp without creating big gaps using a thick saw blade. I was, however, cautious and a little bit afraid that I might have missed a nail somewhere, so I'm using a push stick and very carefully I'm sawing piece by piece. Now, let's talk about dowels and how you could make them, but why you probably shouldn't. To give some background on this, I have a daytime job, so I tend to work on Sundays. And on Sundays the shops are closed. When I realized I didn't have dowels and it would stop my build, figured I could make them myself since they're basically just round sticks of oak. And I have some oak offcuts which would be perfect for this. I started out by sawing them into 1 cm by 1 cm square sticks. I figured this way I'm almost there. Now I just need to get them round. Using my track saw, this time for an application it is actually made for, I measured, marked and then cut the strips into the sticks. And now I'm arriving at the bridge I said I'd cross when I got to it. I have some aluminum tubes which I wanted to use as standoffs. They have pretty sharp edges, so I thought if I just put the stick into my drill and I clamp the standoff to the table, I might be able to just jam it right through. This is how that turned out. This did not work out as expected. Eventually I was able to make enough dowels to continue the build of the lamp. They were not perfect. I would say they had a lot of character. Eventually they were round enough to get through the holes and to continue building the lamp. I would suggest anyone to just buy dowels instead of making them. If you really want to, you can. For this next step, if you really want to try this, please don't. I was quite stupid and I made a lot of mistakes. Let's go over what has to happen. Here we need to drill 40mm big holes in each and every segment of the lamp in order to have a space where the light bulb can sit. My first thought was to put all of the segments together, and using the dowels as a reference stick I may be able to drill through all of them. This turned out to be quite hard. Not only is my drill press not long enough to drill through all of the segments, the orientation of the end grain makes them very brittle, and as you can see I had a couple of them exploding in my hand, which was quite painful. But at least I ended up with some cool slow-mo shots. Looking at the aftermath of this operation, you can see we have quite a low success rate. I also had to spend some time searching and puzzling all of the pieces back together.
We have 5 out of 10 pieces that actually aren't broken. So that's a win.
To fix my mistakes, I just glued the pieces back together, knowing that afterwards, when the dowels hold them together, they will not face much pressure and therefore probably won't break again. While the glue needed some time to dry, I started on the standoffs. I painted them matte black so they wouldn't draw attention. And this is where my procrastination started. I've taken a couple of weeks off of this project and focused on other things. At least the glue had time enough to dry. The time of this recording is the 4th of January. January is my last month at this workshop, as my lease is ending. Not only do I have to fix this project by the end of January, I also need to move everything that I have here to the new shop, which at this moment in time is not even finished. So, under quite a bit of pressure and slightly anxious, I continue working on my project. I'm happy to see that all of the pieces are now glued together and should be ready for assembly. So, I sharpen my chisel. As you can see, the edge is pretty bad. I only have 2 chisels and they're honestly bad chisels. Thing with chisels is, it's handy to have bad chisels that you can use for everything, and a set of good chisels that you use to actually do chisel work. However, I only have bad chisels, so when I need them to clean something up, I've got quite some sharpening to do. Now it was time to prepare the lamp base and work on the electrical wiring. I started out by drilling the hole where the lamp fitting would sit. Again, I used my Forstner bit with carbide tips in order to drill through the hard end grain. This was a difficult task, especially using my hand drill. But being patient and determined, I worked my way through and got the hole drilled.
Okay, I get you. Using an axe to build a lamp is kind of counterintuitive, but hear me out. So I needed some of this braided cable, but I don't have much of my stock left since I sold a bunch thinking I would never ever build a lamp again. That was kind of stupid. Luckily, in my old stock, I found these lamps I used to build back in the day. Since it's firewood anyway, the axe wasn't that weird of a choice since it was the quickest way to turn the existing lamp into back again into firewood and the piece of cable that I needed. So that worked out.
And now that I acquired my long enough piece of cable, I threaded it through the hole that was conveniently already in the beam. I'm actually talking about one of those holes where other beams would sit back when it was still a roof construction. This is how you wire a lamp fitting in Europe. We have blue and brown wire, blue being the neutral and brown being the power. This will probably be quite similar in America as well. And after a quick test, I could confirm that everything was actually working. This meant I could get started on the next step, which was to glue the dowels in place. Now my plan was to, one by one, insert each segment with a spacer in between in order to complete the lamp.
I glued the 3 pins in place into this piece of wood and I started assembling let's call it a lampshade. I started to assemble it, you can still see the glue here, and then I realized, how am I supposed to get the lamp inside? Because once this is all the way stacked up until here, there is no way to get this lamp through the hole into the thread. So then it hit me, why don't I make the whole thing removable from the bottom so you can just take the whole thing off and then you could replace the light bulb. But I was so relieved that the glue hadn't set yet because otherwise I would have had a problem.
To clarify what I was doing here, I actually pulled out the whole piece that I had assembled, waited for the glue to dry and cleaned up as much as I could. Then I put the piece of the lampshade that I had back into the base in order to assemble the rest of the lampshades. The segments fit so snug onto the dowels that I actually was struggling a lot.
Well, the set has changed quite a bit. You will notice that the whole workshop is empty now. It is because I'm in the midst of moving into a new shop. It's bigger, so I'm really excited about that, but it currently doesn't have electricity or water or light. So I'm really pushing forward to getting this project finished up here in my old shop. I have only one day left, which is tomorrow, and I am going to now work on this metal base plate for the lamp, which the other part will sit on.
After some good cleaning and sanding, I just spray painted it black using a matte black finish. And once it was dried, I just continued drilling the holes. I noticed the holes were so tight that I could just stick the screws through vertically. By doing so, I could transfer the marks to my lamp base and drill the holes there. It's regular steel, about a centimeter thick, and my neighbor was nice enough to laser cut this for me. And with that in place, we've reached the point of the final assembly of my last project in this shop. Enjoy these last shots? I know I did.